Everybody, welcome to the CWMU Advisory Committee. My name is Justin Shannon. I'm the Chief of Wildlife for the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, and I'll be chairing the committee tonight. I have a quick statement I want to read before we get into the agenda. And it says, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the ability of the virus to spread from person to person, public gatherings are strongly discouraged by the CDC, State of Utah, and local health departments, since they facilitate face-to-face contact and pose an elevated risk for virus transmission. The Division of Wildlife Resources has determined that public gathering at the CWMU advisory meetings presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who attend, and will conduct this meeting using a fully electronic format. So just wanted to highlight that real quick. This will be a little different for us, but I think we've been on Zoom calls for a long time now, so hopefully we can navigate it. So real quick, before we begin, I just wanted to do introductions with the CWMU advisory members, just to ensure that we have a quorum. And I'll go down my list, and if you're here, please say present. Greg Wildling. Greg, are you here?
Present.
McLean.
Was that Clint McLean?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
It's my Utah accent.
Yeah.
So even worse over Zoom. So Tim Price.
Yeah, I'm here.
Great, welcome. Chris Robinson.
Present. Thank you.
Yeah. Mike Christensen.
Present.
Joel Ferry.
Present.
Welcome, Joel. And Eric Thacker.
Present.
All right, that's everybody. That is a full quorum. Thanks everybody for coming out some time tonight to help us with these issues. Also tonight we have Paul Gedge and Mike Christensen from DWR and DNR to help with the technical stuff. So Paul and Mike, appreciate your help. We also have Kristen Hare, and she's going to be taking notes for us tonight in the minutes of the meeting. And then Chad Wilson, he'll be involved heavily tonight. He's our private public wildlife coordinator. And then Greg Hansen. I thought I saw Greg come on earlier. Greg, are you still with us?
I'm here.
Great.
Yeah, the other Greg is here too. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. So Greg is with the Attorney General's office. He represents the Division of Wildlife, and he'll help us navigate anything that might get sticky. And more than anything, though, he just keeps me on track, which I'm appreciative of. So real quick, wanted to read through the charter and just cover a couple things. The purpose of the CWMU Advisory Committee is to assist the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources in the administration of the CWMU program by providing a third-party representation in matters dealing with the program. The committee will make recommendations to the Wildlife Board, who ultimately has administrative authority for the program. The charter also outlines our authority, the authority of this committee, as stated in Utah Code Chapter 23 for the Wildlife Board and R 657-37, which is where this CWMU Advisory Committee is found in rule. A portion of that rule says a CWMU Advisory Committee shall be created consisting of 8 members nominated by the Director and approved by the Wildlife Board. The committee shall make recommendations to the Director and Wildlife Board on the matters. And it goes on to say our roles and responsibility as a committee. Our first one is to hear complaints dealing with fair and equitable treatment of hunters on CWMUs. Our second is to review the operation of the CWMU program. The third is to review failure to meet antlerless objectives. The fourth is to hear complaints from adjacent landowners. The fifth is to review changes in acreage totals for CWMUs that are under standard minimum acreage or parcel configuration requirements and evaluate the appropriateness of their continued participation in the program. And then finally, the last one is to make advisory recommendations to the Director and Wildlife Board on the matters. So I think as long as we're dealing with items that fall under those 6 things, we're good. And if they're in line with the agenda, and if they're things outside of that, maybe table them for another meeting. So Anyways, that's the charter. Did everybody get a copy of the agenda? Does everybody have that in front of them? Okay, we won't review the agenda, but it'll be my job as chair to keep us on track and moving through the agenda items tonight. I know the meeting is scheduled to go till 9. Given the light agenda items, I'd be really surprised if we went that long, but I guess that'll be up to Eric Thacker how long he wants to wax philosophical on certain topics. So hopefully we're done before then. So
Was that a challenge, Justin?
no, it wasn't. I'm sorry. It was a poor attempt at humor, and yeah, we'll keep rolling. So, okay, then I think we'll get started. Let's see. Process-wise tonight, like we said, we'll follow the agenda. For complaints, we'll do what we did similar to the last couple of years. I think we only have one complaint tonight with Ensign Ranches, and we'll hear that. And we'll give 10 minutes to we'll have Chad introduce the issue at hand. And then we'll give 10 minutes to the complaint and then 10 minutes to the CWMU operator. And then at that point, we'll talk about issues and have questions and discussion as a board before calling for a motion. And so any questions about the agenda, the charter, the process, anything along those lines? We're good? Okay. Let's move on to item number 3 then. Unless Greg Hansen, do you have anything you'd want to add on process or the charter or anything along those lines?
Not specifically. Process-wise, just as we go through discussions and making motions and voting, just that we go person by person so the record can clearly show that, and that if anybody's watching on YouTube, they can see who's associated with which motion and vote.
Okay, that'll help me. Good reminder. Okay, let's get started with number 3. This is a probation review from last year for the CWMU Mount Pisgah. Chad, do you want to introduce it, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So we're getting echo. Clint and I are in the same room, so maybe we'll have to figure this out. But yeah, Pisgah was like Justin said, Pisgah was put on probation last year. As part of that, with their probation, they were asked to come back with 4 items. Those items are, have they been given from the public hunter? So have they been given full and complete access to the entire ranch, which they were, according to the 2 public hunters that we had. 2, has the access been free as well as guide service? They actually opted out of that guide service, so that one was no longer applicable. 3, the public hunters were provided the November deer hunt. Both of them said that they were provided a day in November, and for a measurement of their satisfaction, they both rated high. One gave me a number rating of a 4.5 4.5 out of 5, and the other one just said it was a great hunt. So I feel like they fulfilled all of those measures that we asked of them. One email, one of the hunters did mention that he felt pressured and that his conversation with Mike was not what he would expect from someone partnering with the DWR. But overall, like I said, they fulfilled all the things that were asked of them. And if Mike was going to be on the call, I'm not sure if he is, but want to thank him for making those improvements.
Great, thanks for that summary, Chad. Mike, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm on the call, guys.
Great, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Do you have anything to add from the report that Chad provided?
Well, we had an elk hunt just before the deer hunt, and there was a bull that was wounded that we were looking for, and the one deer hunter that gave us 4.5 out of 5 didn't like us looking for that bull, but he had the entire ranch. We weren't in the area he was hunting in, and that was the only complaint I had.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, any questions from the CWMU Advisory Committee?
No, sir.
I've got one.
Go ahead, Mike.
Chad, did you talk to Jeremy and ask him why he felt the way he did, the way Mike treated him, and what he thought was a poor manner? Yeah.
Yeah. I was able to get a hold of him. Finally, we played a lot of phone tag, but I was able to get a hold of Jeremy today and talk to him. He said that Mike didn't do anything illegal or anything like that, but just he actually said he kind of felt like it was maybe a little bit of a personality conflict, but said that Mike texted him a lot on the first and called him a lot on the first day. Accused him of kicking elk off his property. And then we watched them from side by side on opening day from about 500 yards away, is what he said, and then felt like he wanted him to hurry and kill to get out of their way.
And so, Mike, do you have a response to that? Because that's actually the problem with the program. If we're going down that route where people are babysitting and being accused of things that happens during a normal hunt.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Like I said, we had finished the elk hunt. There was a bull that was wounded, and we were up on top of the towers, completely away from them for a long distance, glassing, trying to find that bull. I have witnesses to that. We had no guns with us. We were trying to find that bull. And Jeremy felt like he should have had the entire ranch to himself with nobody around. And I'm sorry, we just had to try to find that bull. But we did not cross paths with him at all. We were clear up at the top of the towers, and he wasn't even around us. We were on spotting scopes and glasses trying to find that bull. And I could put you in contact with the elk hunter, and he can verify that if you'd like. I took Jeremy to lunch, told him whatever we could do to help him out. We gave quite a bit of business over to Sportsman's through Jeremy. I appreciated that from him. But he was allowed one guest. He ended up bringing 2 guests. And he had people all over the ranch. And I told him, I said, this is where the buck's at, but the more people you bring, the tougher it's going to be. And that was probably 95% of our conversations right there. The first hunter came in, and he brought his son with him. He shot a nice buck. I brought the 4-wheeler around side by side, brought his entire family into the buck so he could get family portraits, packed everything out, and he was just elated. He got a buck in full velvet that had no testicles, so he was really pleased with that.
That's great. You said that you were driving your UTV or ATV.
Only went in to pack them out. That's the only time we use it on the ranch.
Were you using the UTV to get up to the top of the towers to glass for the wounded bull?
Yeah, we just went up to the top to glass. That's all we did, and went back down.
And then is the public hunter allowed to use a UTV to hunt or glass the ranch?
Only after they kill, we go in and help them out. That's all.
But they can't. So
it's a walk on. It's a walk only. Yes.
But it was a walk only for the public hunter. But the private elk hunter, when you went into glass, was a UTV use.
He was a walk only also hunter, but we were looking for a wounded animal in an area that we had to get way up on top to glass in on. The only time we took the ATVs in were to pack their animals out on the deer hunts and the elk hunts.
Okay, any more questions from the committee?
To Michael's line of questioning is, I don't understand the rules well, but if a public hunter or if a private tag participant is allowed to use a UTV, does that mean that the public hunter should also be allowed to use the UTV? Is that where you were going, Michael?
That's exactly right. I see in many of the descriptions on the CWMU hunt planner where it says that UTVs or ATVs, it just says ATVs, are not allowed. but I know for a fact that the CWMUs use those vehicles to get all around their ranches, and 5,000 acre ranch where you can only walk from certain points, very limited points, seems rather cumbersome to me, and not an equitable experience.
Hey, I have a question for you, for Mike.
Which Mike?
Mike Shug. Hey, Mike.
Okay,
Tim
go ahead.
Hey, I know you offered 1 day of November hunting. Do you offer your private clients November hunts?
1 day.
So all your private clients only get 1 day in November as well?
Correct.
All right.
Could I ask just one more clarifying question, please?
Sure. Go ahead, Chris.
What exactly is it that we're trying to do at this point? I mean, I understood that from a year ago, there was some probation or maybe 3 or 4 different conditions or requests that needed to be satisfied. Are we trying to decide the status of the probation on this CWMU? And if so, what are the factors that should come into play?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is yes. Mount Pisgah was put on probation by this committee last year, and they had 4 items that they needed to address, and that was Chad's summary that he provided. And so where we're at in the process is we gave Mike a chance to speak, and now we're just having questions from the committee, either Chad or Mike. And so if there's no more questions, we can move on to the committee discussion and decide if we want to continue on with probation or take Mount Pisgah off. And then I'd entertain a motion after that. Did that help, Chris? So I guess, are there any more questions from the committee to Chad or to Mike? Okay, seeing none. We'll move it on to discussion from the committee.
Hey, Justin. This is Joel.
Hey, Joel.
Ferry. Hey, sorry, I'm driving home, and should be home soon. I'll jump on the Zoom when I get home. But just so I have an understanding, in a situation like this, what is a common when we say a ranking out of 5? You said that he ranked it 4.5 out of 5. Is there a baseline that we normally see? Is that a good ranking? Is it a bad one? I mean, it sounds like there are still a few complaints, but it sounds like there's a lot of it's perception and maybe some confusion of some things that went on there. But can you kind of give me a generally speaking, what you would normally see from a ranking like this?
Yeah, I'll let Chad take a stab at that. Chad, do you want to answer that for Joel?
Yeah, and I don't think as a division, we've defined what's an acceptable or unacceptable ranking, but a 4.5 to me would be a really good ranking. Anything above a 4 is a pretty good ranking. And it is hard to say, it was only, one person gave a numerical value, but from what we've seen from CWMU, a 4.5 or above, even from private guys, is a good ranking.
Doesn't the rule state that they have to maintain a positive ranking, which would be above 3 or something like that?
I'd have to look at that deeper, but I'm not sure if it gives a number. But yeah, I know it says that satisfaction ratings will be taken into consideration.
So if the ranking's 4.5, and Chad, I thought, explained that 3 of the 4 conditions were met and the 4th one was somehow waived, is there a lot of discussion here, or is there a lot of reason to believe that we should do anything other than lift the probation?
Can you guys hear me?
That's, sorry, this is, no. This is committee discussion now, Mike. So.
Oh, sorry,
Yep.
excuse me.
Chris, no, that's a good point. I mean, if Mount Pisgah has met the terms of their probation, and they came back improving on all four of the things that we did, maybe there's not a lot of discussion. And if there's not, I'd entertain a motion. And the motion, really with this committee, it's, do we leave them on probation? Do we lift that probation? So that's really what we have in front of us.
Justin,
Yeah, Eric.
the only thing that gives me pause at all, so I think it's commendable that it looked like all their hunters were satisfied, but the 100 mentioned that he felt he was pressured to use a particular part of the ranch. And that just stood out to me because that's why we're here in the first place. And so I'm not trying to be the turd in the punch bowl, but at the same time, it gave me some concern. Now, all the hunters were successful, and so they were happy. And I think that's generally agreed upon. If they harvest an animal, generally, I think they all go home happy. But I found it concerning that came up again. And I'm assuming the hunter was not aware of previous situations. And so I just found that concerning that same exact issue surfaced again without prompting. I'm not saying it's enough to keep them on probation or anything else, but I think it is worth mentioning that concern arose again.
Yeah, that's a fair observation, Eric.
I don't know if the other members feel differently about it than I do, but that just stood out to me.
No, I had the same thought. And I mean, I don't know that the CWMU needs to be punished more necessarily, but definitely something to still be aware of.
I'll talk for just a second here. I think that's why we're all a little bit, I guess, being cautious and not jumping on a motion to just go ahead and dismiss this one, because we've seen this now for several years, and so this isn't new to us. It still feels like the same problem is, if it's not happening, it's close to happening. And the public hunters are still kind of coming away with that impression that they can't maybe hunt the entire ranch. It'd be nice if the problem was just handled once and for all, and they didn't feel pressured to do anything, and had easy, fair treatment there. And it doesn't feel like that, even though we're checking the boxes. I think I'm inclined to make a motion now, and just talking to you guys about it, to let them off of probation, but cautioning at the same time, hey, they've got to hunt, especially on this ranch where we've had the big problem, because it is divided by some big landowners. They got to hunt the whole ranch. They've got to be treated as just as fair as the other ones. If you've got a November deer hunt, they need the option for a November deer hunt. And I'm inclined to kind of go that direction, but I think that's why we're all being a little bit slow at making a decision right here. Does that sound about right? All right.
Yes, but again, I just find it interesting that it surfaced again within a year.
Yep.
On probation, that it came up again. And again, I'm not saying that they need to be punished, but it makes me really wonder, are we going to be back here in 2 years?
We might be, and I feel the same way that you do. But the fact of the matter is, the public hunters got the opportunity to hunt the whole ranches, which is what we had made as the requirement to get them off of probation. And so, my opinion is that we release them from probation with that caution.
Okay, I could live with that.
But that's a great point, Eric. And I got to tell you, I'm right on board with you.
Greg, if that were a motion, I would second it.
Are we ready for a motion, Justin?
It looks like it. So any other discussion, or are we ready for a motion? If not, go ahead, Greg.
All right, I would like to make a motion that we release the Pisgah CWMU from probation, with the caution to particularly pay attention to allowing public hunters to hunt the entire ranch in the future. Continue to make it a positive experience by a good, positive interface with them, and allowing them the same things that are afforded to the other private hunters. And because you have a November deer hunt, allow them the opportunity to hunt November.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any questions on the motion? Any discussion about it? Okay, I'll call for a vote then. Well, we'll do it this way. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, it passes 8-0. Let me check with Kristen real quick. Kristen, were you able to capture that motion?
Yes.
Okay. And I think this is recorded if we need to go back. So if you've caught it, then I think we're good. So
I'm going to talk.
what's that,
Hey,
Tim?
can I say one thing, Justin?
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Just to Mike Shug, moving forward, usually when people go on probation, it's squeaky clean on the other end. There's no question that they really go above and beyond that next year, especially so they can get off probation. And this isn't that case. I mean, I think we did enough, but it wasn't this case. And I would just caution that if we get another complaint like this, it's not going to be probation, at least for me. It's going to be much harsher. It's going to be worse than that. So I would just caution moving forward that you do better, that there is no question that you're treating the public hunter as well as the paying client, and that the public hunter is getting every opportunity. If you're using a UTV on the property to go glass, yeah, I don't care if the thing's wounded, the public hunter should have the same opportunity, even if they're limited to certain routes or whatever. That I think the same opportunities need to exist. And if not, there's just, if we have these problems again in the next year or two, maybe it's just not meant to be a CWMU. Anyway, those are my thoughts, Mike, and I hope you do better in the future.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. Mike, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your input on this matter. So thanks for coming out tonight. Let's move on to number 4 on the agenda. This is Ensign Ranches. This is a complaint review, so this will be the other side of it. And
Justin?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Inasmuch as Ensign Ranches is our CWMU, I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion. And I don't know whether our operator, which is my son-in-law, Travis Murphy, will participate or not. I can't quite see whether he's I think he is. I see a number that might be his, but in any event, I'm just going to sit back and have a drink of water, of course.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you recusing yourself from the discussion and the voting here. Chad, do you want to introduce this? And then following Chad introducing the complaint, we will hear from the complainant, and then we will hear from the CWMU operator.
Yeah. So Tyler was the complainant on this, and I reached out to him and invited him to this meeting. I don't know if he wanted to talk. I told him that he said what he had to say, he put in the report that I sent out in the email that you all saw. He also had another meeting, so he may not be here. So I guess we'll see here in a second if he was able to make it. But to sum up his complaint, mostly it was just about not enough communication and not feeling like he was being reached back to when he'd call. And that gave him concern that his hunt may not be as good as what it could be. Ensign Ranches also, y'all saw the packet that I sent out with their emails and their responses to that. And they said that they did speak to Tyler the first part of June. July 27th, they sent out an email with the hunter's packet and the hunt dates to his email. They also spoke to him on August 26th, and And they followed up with him on that day to try to make sure that he had that hunter packet. The dates they offered were that he was going to hunt was in November, so it was significantly before those that hunt was going to come.
Okay, is that it, Chad?
Yeah.
Perfect. Tyler, are you on the call? Are you with us tonight? Okay. Not hearing anything from the complainant. Do we have the CWMU operator with us tonight? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't unmute me. This is Travis Murphy online, if you can hear us.
Yeah. Hey, welcome, Travis. Travis, the complainant didn't show up, but we received the packet sent out by Chad, and so we've got our minds wrapped around the conflict from both sides. So we've got that, but the time is yours. You have about 10 minutes to provide any rebuttal or anything along those lines that you'd like to. So we'll give you about 10 minutes if needed.
You bet. We'll try not to take that. We've been doing this since 2003. Probably our first time in ever that I've been in this situation. We take our job to heart. We're a big advocate of the public side of this deal, and we think we do a really good job. And we think we have a really high rating. Since we've started, between antlerless and antlered hunts with public, we've hosted nearly 2,000 hunters for the state of Utah. We do about 115 to around 80 antlerless, and then trophy bulls, moose out. We do quite a lot. We feel as though we do a really good job, and we work very close with Chad and Dave Rich and Wardle. So this really bothers us that we've got to this point where we can't get someone to where we can't find a happy place, to be quite honest. And so I just want to go through it real quick. At the day of the draw, your phone goes crazy, and in this case, I did because of the volume of calls before people wanting to know we take it through an office, and we have a team of 3 of us that respond to the volume. One person, it's hard when you have 50 candidates applying for a moose tag, and you need to talk to most of them where it's once in a lifetime. So we've done our best with the division on the antlerless and the trophy hunts to formulate jointly as much as our formula is the divisions to line out a protocol that is effective and can work. And so on the day of the draw, I received a text, didn't know who it was. It just said, "Hey, I drew an elk on ensign." I said, "Congratulations, we'll reach out to you." About a week later, or 10 days, this one I didn't have recorded on our phone, but somewhere I had talked to him. He told me one problem is the person who was calling me isn't the hunter. The hunter was Diana Rasmussen. It wasn't Diana, it was her son. But he said, "Hey, my mother's, got some age. She lives in Morgan. Your packet shows one guest." I said, "Well, I don't expect you to pack one out, but we would like you to stay to one vehicle, not have moldable. That's just kind of what we do, So we'd like to say, but whomever you can fit in the vehicle." We talked about the access was good and 100% harvest and usually a 6-point bull. We went through a lot of detail. We also verbally went through the dates. We do have the extended bull elk season. The division asked us to, if we're given the extended season, they asked us to extend that to the public hunters as an option. So instead of just extending it, we just schedule the public hunters in the extended season. Some of which every year don't want the extended season, and we allow them to come in different dates. But in the proclamation, we've done a really good job to try and get a lot of information. We give them the date, the 5-day hunt. We'll meet you. We'll show you all the things. One of the unfortunate things is he must have Googled me as an entity or me as a person. And instead of using the phone number or the emails, never had been contacted that have been laid out in the Division of Wildlife catalog. That's not, he was reaching out to a personal phone. Not that that's an excuse, because I did talk to him on those phones. So I talked to him one point. Later, Holly, after the draw, Holly usually follows up with the division with the big list of names. 2 to 3 weeks thereafter, we send out the packets. We send all the packets out at the same time. We did get those emails out in a week or so they were out timely. They were out at the time that we feel is appropriate. As Chad mentioned, they had been out for 3 weeks. And then when I did have this call, it was still 109 days before his hunt, and he was ticked. We talked for about 30 minutes about, I apologize. And at the time of the call, to be honest, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, my fear is I hope that his email didn't bounce back, that we would have caught that, and I told him, I'll make sure you have that. We're still in July at this point. Let me get it to you. So we talked for quite a while. He was very upset. By the time we had finished, he wasn't as upset. I told him I ought to sleep on it and see if his mom would come. It's about his mom he said he was embarrassed. He didn't want to see me at that point. I told him he didn't have to see me, but I told him I've got really thick skin. It's not a problem to see me. If you want to come and see us, or if you want me to have you, meet Tanner or one of our other lead guys and show you the ranch, I may be off on another ranch anyway. But if you're embarrassed about how this conversations went, no need be. Anyway, he did threaten. He said, I'm sending this to RAC. I'm sending this everywhere. And I said, I was candid with him. I said, there's nothing to hide here. We've done nothing wrong. We're trying to cooperate with you. We'd like you to, and that's what this is. It's a cooperative program. And so if I were the hunter, I would have thought, doggone it, they did send me a packet. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I didn't. I'm not being rough on it, And at this point, I talked to him 3 times in July. So we did, as soon as I was done with that call, I called Chambray Peterson, our office manager, and said, hey, we got a public hunter that's upset. She's very guarded about her job. She knows the depth of what, if this goes wrong, that it can, go bad. So she's very careful to make sure everything's done right. She called him within 12 hours and said, hey, you did receive the same email, whether that's your mom's email or yours that was provided to the state. You did receive it. It didn't bounce. It shows accepted. It is there. I'm going to resend it to you and make sure you have it. Let me know once you get it. It shows your dates. It shows everything that you need to know. So he had got it. I did ask him to sleep on it. He did tell me he was going to turn the tag in. Then when I hadn't heard back from him, Monday, the next business day, I called Dave Rich and says, hey, I think I've got a hunter that's past bugged. And I says, if he calls, our intentions are to work it out. He said he'd let Chad know, Wilson. I said, whatever we can do to work it out. He did mention to me, and we did offer, he didn't want his mom in the later dates. I said, not a big deal. The other public hunters that come, like the moose hunters, the antelope, they come in earlier in the season by a month. You can come when, they come. That wasn't an offer. Not much of those things, and I know it's hard to write letters. Not any of those things are in the letter. The reality is, I would really, really wish that we could just have the advisory board listen to the phone call. But so at that point, I did hear from, I left it at Dave. They turned in their tag, and they've been upset, and they wrote this letter. So as an operator, I feel horrible. I don't really know how much more I could do. And he was very upset, and not in a cooperative very upset. He didn't want to hear anything that we could do, So I didn't know where that left us, and that's why I just left it. I told Dave, I said, I don't know what to do. So that's where we're at today. That's all I've got to report on.
Great. Thanks, Travis. Sure appreciate that report. Let's turn it over to the committee for questions. Is there any questions from the committee for Travis?
I got one for you, Travis. This is Clint. It sounds like he called like you were saying, he called your personal phone. Reading through the emails, it sounds like from both letters, he was aware that he was contacting you on your personal phone. Did he ever switch and start using, the listed number and communicate that way, or did he continue just trying to reach out on the other number?
Never did switch to the email, never did, even on the resend of the email, never communicated. Now the email, so Diana drew it, the phone number that we were given was Diana's, but the email was Tyler's. He must have applied for her. He never did respond and say, and we've searched just because it's got to be factual. And he has never contacted through a search, the phone that's been designated. The only 3 times that, and I was on one trip, and I missed. I had 4 hits on my phone from him, one of which I missed. But within a week, we had talked. I was just out of town, and so no, he never did. There was no coordination on what's listed in the proclamation or was sent out in our hunter packet. No hits.
Okay, thanks. I kind of thought that was, knowing how businesses work, I understand you have certain people that you need to contact, and they're the ones whose job it is to keep track of everything. And so, I understand the need for having that number in the proclamation. So it's kind of weird to me that he continued to keep trying to call on the wrong number, but thanks.
Any other questions for Travis?
I have one.
Hey, Just. Oh,
Go ahead.
Hey,
Joel, go ahead, Joel, and then we'll go Mike.
All right, thanks. Hey, just real quick. What is your normal protocol when you, like in this instance, when you'll reach back out to a public hunter who's drawn one of your tags? I mean, you usually, in this case, it sounded like he was most concerned because it had been so long in between the draw and when some of that correspondence happened. I mean, was this one just delayed a little bit, oversight, or is it normal that way? And this guy was just a little on edge, or what's your normal protocol there?
So protocol is you'll have the draw applications put out. People will learn, and these might be just a few days off, but say the last week of May or something, they'll learn that they drew the tag. They know that before we know that, and this has been brought up at the CWMU level, and it's gotten better. Holly does a great job, but they'll know that, and you'll start to get texts and little blips, and you'll see social media blurts. Hey, I drew ensign, and they'll be wherever they show up. You'll hear, but there will be a 2 to 3 week gap. Sometimes the week when the division sends you the list of people. When they send us the list, then we have a phone number and an email. So there is a couple weeks, so there's not much we can do about that. So, we're into, that June-ish, later, mid to late June somewhere. We then will send out an email that says, congratulations, here's your hunter packet. And we try really well to put pages of information and stuff in. Here's when we'll meet you. We'll show you the ranch. Here's your scheduled date. But so even though we get them that, we like it to be written so that there isn't any miscommunication on when we're supposed to show up, or, just and they're, so we do that. Then these are as if they're a once in a lifetime tag. We're not naive to that. We don't have any problems with limiting them where they go. We guide a lot of these guys for free. I think I've got a crazy good rating. So we know they're once in a lifetime. So then at that point, they're reached out and they have talked to either Sam, Tanner, or myself. The three of us filled those calls, and we reach out to them, or they have already reached out to us and beat us to win before Holly has, got us the stuff and the email. And so, however, if you get them stuff, we kind of do it in a process, and it's the same time building our schedule on these ranches. We'll have week. We have a couple 2 weeks that are, identified for the public hunters, that they have the sole run of the place, And so as we do our schedule, and they're identified in the proclamation up front, when we anticipate those dates, and everybody's going to have some sort of something to work through, to be honest. They're going to have age or don't like the date or anyway. So we do reach out to them, and we talk to every one of them. Tanner and I meet every one of them, show them around, most of which are guided. We guide them for free, take them, and 99.9% of it, once they've been there and they understand, we got a Wyoming boundary and we got 4 large ranches, and this is a very big ranch, and they're nervous about getting around and how to get from point A to B. So we just take them. But that's kind of how it shakes out. We handle it, and no, we was not slow getting back to them. I would say if you talk to your hunter 3 to 4 hits and had emailed him something within between, 3rd week of June and the last week of July, I think most private hunters would be surprised that they got that kind of attention. They don't. But anyway, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. So it wasn't. I guess my question really goes to the way you treated Tyler and his mom wasn't any different necessarily than it was part of the normal process. It's just not, maybe 100%. Their expectation was different. Okay, that's my question. All right,
if you would have seen his email that did get to him, he would not have been upset. The core of the problem was he didn't see his email, and it was there. And then he got really upset, and he waited a few weeks. We thought he had the receipt. We thought that he had most of the information. There was a scheduled time where they knew they were going to be contacted, and and they knew when to get their vacation set. So the core of the problem was he had an email. He didn't know he had it, or it went into his spam on his computer, but he had it. And then after, then he got bugged. But I had told him in the previous phone call that what was in the email, and that there was, the packets and what it would say, and, all the, I'd kind of already rehearsed that. So I'm a little bit at a loss, to be quite blunt.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Travis, this is Mike Christensen. When I was looking through the information in the packet that we got, it looks like he texted you on your phone on like May 18th. That's when you responded. Then you said, we'll be in touch. He texted you again on July 9th. And then there's another text from him that says it'll be my last attempt to text you. I don't know what day that was. Is there a reason why you just didn't tell him to use the preferred phone number and not contact that phone number?
So the one that we had talked against, so the May text, between the one I had missed, we had already had a 20-minute phone call. And so, I didn't, at that point, I felt as though I'd answered all his questions. I felt like he knew he could bring his brother. I knew how old his mom was. He knew that we could change the date. He knew a lot. He knew the harvest. He knew everything. What I thought was everything. And I told him that to watch for the email. And the email went out, was in mid-June or somewhere in June, whatever. I don't know the date. I'm not in my computer, but So he had the email. I thought that he had everything. He had all the contact. He had, I just thought he had everything. And at the same time, if you get to these guys and you spend too many of the details 150 days ahead of a hunt, if we're doing this all in May, all they're going to do is come back to you and ask you again in June and again in July and again in August. So not that it's right or wrong, but we try to do the most optimal time. It gives them plenty of time to get to work. It's fresh on their mind. They're starting to think about, but all this stuff was still happening in June and July. I mean, it was 30 days when this stuff all went. It seems, anyway, keep going.
I just can say, it says that the email was sent on July 27th. So.
Okay, correct. And so we had I'd talked to him once, and then we had the email, which by the time we get all of our schedules and all our public guys at that point, we've talked to most of them to coordinate. It does take a while to get to everybody and say, all right, these are, and send them out. And that has seemed to be, about the appropriate time so that it doesn't, it just seems to be the appropriate time. If the advisory board of the CWMU says, hey, we really want you guys to all shoot for having these out July 15th, or, we're happy to do that, whatever you guys think. But from our perspective, that's months ahead of your hunt. And seems reasonable.
Thanks, Travis. Any more questions from the committee? If not, let's move it on to internal discussion then. Thoughts?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. To me, I mean, obviously this is one of the great CWMUs in the program. They've never had at least as far as I know, they've never had a complaint. I just think no matter how good of an operation you run, you're going to have a complaint, whether it's a personality conflict, whatever it was. But it just seems like to me that this complaint, Tyler had given up. It's like he gave up at some point. Maybe he didn't want the tag or whatever, but it just feels like to me, I was thinking at first maybe there was a communication gap, but I don't, I think with as many hunts as Ensign runs, I think they do a good job. And obviously not having a complaint to this point and having a very high satisfaction rating just makes me think that we should probably just disregard the complaint and move on, is my thought.
I agree with you, Tim. Honestly, as I looked over the complaint and the response, I don't know. I mean, I kind of look at it and yeah, I feel like as Travis was talking to him that there was, trying to come to understanding. It sounds like he, let him know the email was coming. He missed the email. If they've got proof that was there, I mean, that's the hunter's got to take some responsibility at some point too. Is kind of my own personal thoughts. If I had the tag, I probably would be, excited and I'd want to push through. And even if I was pissed off, heck, if I still had 109 days to figure things out, I think I'd, put a little bit more effort into making sure I got up on the mountain and had a good hunt. I could still whine about it a little bit and be a little bit disappointed, but, at the same time, if I'd missed the email, I would need to take responsibility as a hunter. And I don't think that we can put all that weight on the CWMU. I think it's a give and take on both sides, I think. So I agree with you, Tim. I mean, if there hasn't been any problems before and yeah, it's a good CWMU and it's being managed well. Sometimes you have those people who just, once they're ticked, they don't want to change anything. So I kind of agree. I'd disregard it.
So
sorry, Mike Lauder's got his hand up, and then we'll go to you, Eric.
I just want to agree with the group. I think for me specifically, the detailed with the changing of the dates and accommodating the earlier dates. I think the accommodating the extra attendees on this hunt and making arrangements for that to take place. I think the meat of the discussion between the outfitter and the hunter had happened at this point. And once those dates were established, I think we were probably, for me, I agree with the group in regards to moving past this.
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
So for me, the other thing that makes me inclined to agree with just moving past it is the individual, first off, was operating outside of the protocols that were clearly delineated. I mean, we got the official thing right off the division's website about who to contact and what numbers, the form of contact. So to me, they were outside of that. I found it interesting that he kind of dropped it as well. I also found it interesting that he talked about, well, let me back up. The other concern is this is my second or third year, but this is the second time we've had a complaint come before the board where the primary individual communicating was not the tag holder. And I think that always creates a gap, right? So his mother is technically the tag holder, but he even explicitly stated right in the thing that he wanted to use his mother to mentor one of his kids on the hunt, right? So it seems like that even added to the complexity here that this wasn't that his mother was, well, yeah, I guess I just question even the motives here, because it's not that his mother was upset with the dates or anything else. This revolved around, somebody, well, I'm assuming it's his desires. All I'm getting at is that just complicates this whole thing, especially when you have the person that has the tag that's not doing the communicating. I think that's the other factor. I think the outfitter clearly showed that he was willing to try to resolve any concerns. I think it's, if you look at a made draw, even if you're a private hunter, I don't know that you would have things nailed down much beyond that. So I think there was just some unrealistic expectations. I actually find it a little concerning that he continued to use the private cell phone of the individual, even after he'd been informed. It's almost like he was looking for additional treatment or better treatment because he was using that personal cell phone. So I think that all just leads me to conclude that it was a little excessive in terms of his expectations.
Any other discussion? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
I'd just say that I tend to agree with the group that it's probably just to move along and learn from a situation. I don't know that we see anything where, Travis said to use that other number. I just caution the committee to take a little care, and if the guy's mom's not going to call up and talk to the CWMU operator, my wife's probably not going to call. It's okay that somebody's designated to call, but they probably should be on the same page. But I don't think the CWMU holds any responsibility in this, rather than just, move along and try your best and continue. So.
Okay. I think we've heard enough, had some plenty of discussion. Greg Hansen, are you on the call?
Yep, sure am.
Where this is an action item, is it appropriate for us to ask for a motion? Do we need to have a motion that says that we wouldn't place them on probation, or if there's no motion, can we just move on and it's good? Can you help me with that?
If it's an action item, you need a motion, a second, and a vote of one form or fashion or another.
Thank you. Okay, well, hearing the discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
I've got a motion. I move that we dismiss this complaint.
I second.
Okay, we got a motion from Mike Christensen to dismiss the complaint, seconded by Eric. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Please note that I recused myself or abstained.
Will do. So we have 7 in favor of that motion, with Chris Robinson abstaining. Great. How are we doing? We're an hour into it. Why don't we move on to number 5, operation trainings and probation review. Chad, do you want to give us an update on where we're at with this?
Yeah, I'd love to. So for operator trainings in 2020, we had 100% attendance. COVID is to credit or blame, I guess, whichever way you want to look at it. But majority of them still hit the February Expo meeting. Those that didn't, I ended up recording a 15-minute presentation that counted for their training, and the rest ended up watching that. If you remember last year, we had 6 operators. It was 6 or 7 operators that did not do the training. 3 of those operators didn't show up to our committee meeting and were put on probation. Those were Antelope Creek, Rattlesnake, and Summit Point. So all 3 of those actually did their training for 2020. Summit Point did not turn their application in on time for this last go around, so they're actually they're not going to be a CWMU for this upcoming year. And I also invited Antelope Creek and Rattlesnake both to be on this call. I'm not sure if they made it or not.
Okay, thanks for that update, Chad. First of all, I think that's fantastic. We have that type of attendance and response. It would probably be appropriate to work with the CWMU Association to send out an email thanking everybody for doing that, because that's an important part of the rule to attend those trainings. The second part is, do we have representation from any of the CWMUs that were listed in Chad's summary? Any 3 of those operators on the call tonight?
Yes, this is Tim Hale from Rattlesnake.
Great. Welcome, Tim. Thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, Chad, this is, we have this listed as an action item as well. What action do we take as the CWMU Advisory Committee on this?
So I think on this, the action would be whether where they're on probation, whether to end their probation or continue probation, or make a decision on the probationary status of these 3 CWMUs. Okay,
thank you. So just to clarify, the 3 CWMUs did attend the training this last year. They were placed on probation in 2019 for not attending, and then they did attend in 2020, correct? That's the summary?
Yeah, so they didn't attend 2019. So it would be the 2020, the February meeting we had in 2020 is when they were put in probation, so a year ago. But it was for not attending the 2019.
Great. Any discussion amongst the CWMU Advisory Committee?
Hey, of course, I was around when we made this rule change to have the operators do these trainings, and man, I got to say, we all got to pat ourselves on the back. That's incredible that we had 100% attendance to these trainings, and I think, under the direction of Chad and with help of Justin here, the trainings have all been very good, very helpful, and are helping this program, and I think we're seeing it in the number of complaints continuing to go down. So just super awesome. I'm inclined to make a motion to release these guys based on their attendance of the trainings, and I don't see them in any recent complaints anyways, which is even more awesome. So anyways, thank you. Good work, Chad. Appreciate all your hard work on that.
Thanks, Greg. Is that a motion?
Unless anyone's going to yell at me, I'll make a motion. All right, I want to make a motion that we release the 3 CWMU operators that were placed on probation last February for not attending operator training, release them from that probation, put them back into full compliance status due to the fact that they attended their training now. We've got some attending tonight. That's it.
Great. We have a motion from Greg. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. Clint McLean.
Okay, seconded from Clint.
Yeah.
Any discussion on the motion? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 8-0. Thank you, Chad, for that report. And will you please find a way to convey to the CWMU operators that just our gratitude from the CWMU Advisory Committee for attending those. So even if it's an email and in association with the CWMU Association. So, yeah, thank you. Okay, moving on to number 6. This is Public Lands and CWMU review. Chad, do you want to give us an introduction here and some information on this agenda item?
Yeah, so this one came to us, if you remember last year, Mike Christensen at this meeting last year actually asked the division to look at the public land and CWMU, specifically the enforceable boundary, definable boundary leg of that. With that, the division, we didn't make any changes to the rule since that request was made. A wildlife board in December passed the motion stating, I move that the division and the CWMU Advisory Council present to the board a report on the current public lands located within CWMU boundaries and reasoning and justification for it. So to fulfill Mike's request and the division's request, that's why I sent out that packet with maps. And also we gave the opportunity to CWMUs to give you insight, I guess, from their point of view of the benefit and the reason and the need for their accessible public land to be in the CWMUs. Tonight, it's not our intent to go into these one by one. They were more sent out that there'd be an example so you could see the complexity of public lands in CWMUs, the different reasonings and the different types. But we also want to look and see if there are changes that we can help. I know this is a concern of the public, the central region and the northern region at our RACs really expressed concern about these public lands. And so I think there are ways that we can ease concerns from the public or even tackle Mike's request of looking at making a rule change there. Currently, all the CWMUs are in a management plan, so a bulk of them just got renewed. So a lot of them are starting out on their 3 years of the COR. And I think the best time to deal with these would be when they are up for renewal. I think as a division, we could do better at presenting this. So I guess that's kind of what I would propose, is that when CWMUs with public land go through the RAC and the board process, that we pull each and every one of those out with a map. With that, we also would state the public benefit, as in rule. In rule, it states that there's a public benefit that needs to be gained for the public land being in there, so that we would clearly show where that public land is on each CWMU that had it, say whether it was accessible or not, and state what the benefit of the public would be coming out of that. A lot of them, the compensation that the public gets is trade lands. So part of that would be also showing what lands they are trading. So it's easily seen where that's at and what that trade and the amount of acreage that it looks like. So with that, I don't know that I have a whole lot more to say on that, unless I can clarify anything with questions.
Chad, can I ask you a question? As I read through some of these, they talked about the land that they're swapping, and specifically one of them had some walk-in hunting access. And I was just curious, if they're claiming a swap, are they being paid for that walk-in hunting access?
They shouldn't be. So I don't know I can't remember exactly which one, but that, yeah, if they are, then that would be something that would look at of removing that. They're not going to get both of that. Either it's traded or it's in walk-in access.
Right. So that's what I'm getting at is, well, there's kind of two questions. So Ingham Peak is the one I was looking at, right? And so it appears there's a bunch of sections, which I think it's awesome that they're swapping like that. I think that's in good faith to the public. But then I just wondered, are they being paid for that walk-in hunting access? The other question I have is if they are making private land, if they're doing that land swap, they're making private land available to the public. Is that public information? Meaning, is it listed as a walk-in access property? Because that was the other question I had is, a lot of these listed property that they were trading, which again, I think is awesome. But the question I have is, is the public always aware of that trade?
Yeah, to answer that, I think that's something that we can do better as a division. It is on our website, and up till today, it was kind of in a spot I don't think a lot of people look. It was under the maps section, and there's a CWMU reference map that has a layer that's called trade lands. Today, I got that moved over, so it's on the hunt planner. There's actually an option there you can pull it down on the hunt planner. So we're moving that direction to make that more accessible and viewable. I've had conversations with some internally that a potential rule could be requiring them to post that trade land on the ground as open for hunting.
Well, I guess my question, why wouldn't we just list that as a walk-in hunting access?
I could see your lips moving, Eric, but I couldn't hear you.
Oh, so I guess my question is, if they're swapping land, right? They're trading making some of their private land available to the public. Why would we just list that as a walk-in access property?
Because it's for big game access. I don't think we do walk-in access for big game, do we? It's all small game.
Nope.
I'm not super versed on that. But Justin, were you going to talk?
Yeah, I think we do have walk-in access for big game. The walk-in access program, you essentially have to spell out which species you'll be pursuing and with that whole agreement. But Eric, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, you're getting at find a way to communicate that these lands are available for hunting, correct? And if we do that through the walk-in access program or another route that's pretty simple and clear and can be communicated well, that's kind of what you're after?
Yeah, it makes sense to me, and maybe it's because I have used the walk-in access program a lot, that'd be the easiest way to communicate that is to show that it's available to the public. Because I would have never thought to look for CWMU trade lands. So it's great that it's on the hunt planner now, like Chad mentioned, but again, I wouldn't have even thought to look for that prior. Because I would dare bet a lot of the public aren't even aware that there's land that's been swapped out as part of the CWMU program.
I agree completely, Eric. And Chad, not to be too confrontational on it, but you said that there's a lot of swapped out lands, and there really aren't. Only up in the northwestern corner where there's some checkerboard is where they've kind of done a lot of the swapping. And it's only for a handful of CWMUs that have that bulk of that acreage. If you go west, that's west of I-15 and north of I-80. The whole rest of the state, you've only got like 4 or 5 parcels of swapped lands for the whole rest of the state. So there's not a lot of swapped lands in comparison to how many private lands are held within CWMU boundaries.
You mean in comparison to how many public lands are held within CWMU boundaries, not private lands?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I misspoke. Thanks, Chris.
I mean, I looked at all of these. I'm not sure what to make of them. I mean, whether you wanted us to just be aware of these CWMUs that had public lands within their boundaries, or whether we need to scrutinize them one at a time. Like you said, Chad, that the appropriate time is when the CORs are up for renewal. But I'm not really sure, other than to have perused them, which I've done, what to do with the information.
Chad, can I ask you a question real quick? How much of our CWMU rule addresses trade lands?
Yeah, it doesn't address trade lands in our rule. It just says the public must be compensated. And so that's going off the top of my head, but yeah, I don't think it really goes into the nuts and bolts of trade lands and what we do, besides that it's a form of compensation.
Chad, I have a question for you. It's Tim. Hey, do you know how many extra tags there are given because there's public lands within a CWMU boundary?
I don't know that total off the top of my head. I created a spreadsheet kind of late in this, but let's see. I mean, we have White's Valley's one every 3 years. West Hills gives an extra tag. Raft River, which will be a new CWMU this year, is doing a 90-10 split, but it'll be a 7-3 so it looks like they're giving 2 extra tags. I mean, overall, Deseret gives a few extra. I mean, we're probably looking at 20 or 30 if I had to estimate.
Okay, thanks.
Do you have a way of tabulating that in a spreadsheet that would maybe show, each CWMU that has public lands, maybe show the acreage public versus private in the CWMU, a column maybe if there's swapped lands, and then how many additional tags were given in exchange for allowing the public lands to be included. That sounds like a lot of work, but it would be an easy way to try to analyze what's really going on.
Yeah, and I started down that process, like I said, a little bit late, and so I have that partially done. I'd probably say more than half done, so I could finish that up and send it out to the group for sure.
The other thing that seems to be a driver is whether or not the public lands included within the CWMU have public access otherwise. And I didn't fully understand the difference between level 2 and 3, whether that was a distinction based on how much public access there was. But if that's going to become obviously somebody along the course of time determined that these public lands were okay to include, and I don't know if that is now going to be revisited with each COR renewal to see, maybe the criteria is more strict if the lands have public access otherwise, then they shouldn't be included or something. I don't understand that distinction.
Yeah, I hope I got them all in the right categories. Level 2s are supposed to be ones that just had accessible land, where level 3s had a mixture. So some of it was not accessible and some of it was, if that makes sense.
Did you say level 2 has no access or is accessible?
Is accessible.
Without crossing the private land?
Oh, yeah, all of their public land would be out on a boundary and be accessible to the public, where level 3 would have some of those accessible lands, but also they have some that are landlocked.
Thank you.
So just a little backstory on this, why I requested this, and I think why the board has requested it. There's a huge backlash against the CWMU program for the inclusion of public lands, and especially accessible public lands. And it was so bad in the central rack that there was a pretty good chance that the CWMU proposal would not have passed. It was probably one of the most heated racks I've ever sat in. And another big issue with including public lands within the CWMU boundaries is those public lands to operate a commercial business have to, whoever operates that has to be licensed and insured and apply for a special use permit through that land management agency. And so it's actually, I mean, it's kind of opened a pretty large can of worms from the public's view. Like I say, I've never seen a rack that was that intense. The other thing is when I was first on the CWMU committee back, I think it was in 2005, I believe the same wording existed in the rule that you could use public lands for a definable boundary. And the public that's expressed to us through the rack system, and to me personally, don't find that argument holds water anymore, especially with the technology that we have. You know, a private landowner, which, you know, we've owned a ranch and I have a herd of cows, I understand it, but I have to mark my boundaries to show what's mine. And so the definable boundary really should lie on the shoulders of the CWMU and of the landowner, and not have the public take a hit. When we look at the satisfaction ratings, so what happens for everybody to know, the rack and board process have gone online over the last couple of years, and people can get online and they go through and they can comment and they can leave a positive or negative or neutral feedback towards each item that's presented. The CWMU program topics, I don't know that they ever break 20-25% positive rating. I love the CWMU program. I think it's a great program. That's why I'm dedicated to serve it. But I think it's naive of us to not see the negativity that's spread within the public concerning the program, and what can we do to address that. And public lands is probably one of the biggest negative feedbacks that I hear. So,
hey, Mike, can I just say something to that? Do you think it would help if this was published, if the benefit was published, if there are trade lands that are acceptable, the amount of tags that are given, and maybe there still are some where people are like, no, this shouldn't be in. The one issue I have with that, though, is, you know, there's technology for access. Well, we had a issue on our CWMU this year where someone just ripped a sign down, right? And all that technology exists the other way too, right? Where people, and I think if you go down that rabbit hole, it could be a similar thing where, are we going to not post our private property anymore? And if someone's there and they don't have written permission, it's trespassing, you know? Anyway, those are just some of my thoughts.
I would agree with Mike. I think, at least, you know, from what I've heard and experienced, you know, the inclusion of those public lands into a CWMU it's an interesting blend, because in a sense, somebody's benefiting from that public land, right? In an economic fashion. So sure, they have to go get permits so they can guide on those. But I think the requirement then is we have to be extra vigilant in justifying why that's occurring. So I agree with Tim. I think it'd help if there was more transparency to the trade-offs, because I think most people they're not aware of those trade-offs, right? So is it land that they're trading off? You know, this would be easily published and added to the information on CWMUs. Is it land that they're trading? You know, if they swapped land, and if so, where's it at? Or if they issued more tags? I think that'd help reduce some of that conflict. But I'm with Mike. I'm not sure if the fact that it makes it easier on the CO and the operator to use a county road and include a whole section of BLM in order to do that versus, that land being held in public trust. I guess I'm agreeing with Mike that I think that warrants some more discussion, because I'm not sure that in of itself is a justification of the means to the end. That's my 2 cents.
I wanted to just say that I think, just as dealing with the public hunter complaints is super important, and if the inclusion of public lands is a big burr under many people's saddle, I think we need to be really careful. I do business in Idaho and Wyoming where we have ranches, and there's nothing at all like this CWMU program. And in order for it to be sustainable and to endure, there has to be public benefit. And to the extent that we turn a deaf ear to that, or we aren't vigilant in ensuring that, we won't long endure in this arrangement. And it is a great, the principles of the CWMU, in my opinion, are terrific, of making available to the public lands that otherwise wouldn't be. But it's a fragile system that could easily be done away if we don't manage it well. I don't know whether that means, with the advent of the famous Onyx, where you can tell where you are. We have a little CWMU down in Millard County or Sevier County where there's a 40-acre inholding, and people know exactly where it is, and it's fun to hunt along the boundary. But that aside, I think if the rule needs to be changed such that it's no longer needed to have a clearly definable boundary, or if there are, if the ratio of additional public tags isn't enough to justify the public benefit, then we should take a hard look at that. Make sure that we're not negligent in protecting the public's interest in this.
I think that's well said, Chris, a lot better than I could say it. I think the program, it's okay for the program to evolve. And when I look through, maybe we're not here to solve all the issues tonight. I don't think there's enough time in the evening to do that. But I think it's important not to just say, okay, we tried and just put it on the shelf or throw it in the garbage can. I think going forward, something to the board, that could direct the division to look into this more. I mean, it could be as easy as no more public lands as a definable boundary, or if you choose to, use those and there's a different permit split. Because when I looked through, I went through and I looked through a lot of the permits, and according to the splits and how they work, very few CWMUs that contain public lands within their boundaries, accessible or not, are giving permits, and even less are giving trade lands. So, but it does. There's not like a set formula for it. Like Park Valley Hereford, like they have 2,100 public acres within their CWMU, and their private acres is 12,000. So what's that, about a sixth? And they give 6 extra deer tags for those 2,000 acres. There's not another CWMU that comes even close to that. Most don't give any. Some might give 1. So it just doesn't. There needs to be some more uniformity to the program with that also.
Well, that's where this tabulation would come in handy to kind of see if there is any rhyme or reason as to how many, the ratios of public to private in the CWMUs, and what the split is on the tags, and it might be a useful tool.
Chad, let me ask a question real quick, and then we'll go to you. Mike, is kind of what you're getting at when you talk about uniformity is in the future, if we decide or the Wildlife Board chooses to continue to allow accessible public lands or public lands in general, to kind of come up with the formula. I'm trying to think about what you were saying. And so like if you have X amount of additional public land, then you give one more public permit. If it's another tier, then you give 2. If it's another tier, you give 3. Is that kind of what you were getting at, to kind of add consistency? So that way we can do our formulas, our 90-10 split, 80-20. But then if you have public land, we identify that in the rack and board process and highlight it and say, here's the public land. And we can do this in our presentations, or here's all the CWMUs. Here's the recommendations for those that don't have any public land. This is what it is. And then we have some that do have public land. And the ones that have public land, we're getting X amount of permits because of X percentage of their CWMU is public land. And we highlight that. I'm just trying to make sure you understand the discussion.
Yeah, something like that where you can show the public that they are getting a benefit by including the hunting of those public lands, because that's all you're really, the division is allowing is for the hunting of whatever species those are. And maybe it could be as simple as, if you contain public lands within your CWMU, you can't qualify for a 90-10 split, and then that, but at the same time, they can't, go back and say, well, we got an 80-20, so now we want, less antlerless tags. I mean, there's got to be a check and a balance there. But this is just throwing ideas out. This is nothing to, not a proposal. It's just random ideas.
Well, just along that same lines, one of the things that I've experienced personally is I may be hunting upland birds, right? But I come across public land that's tied up in a CWMU for elk and deer, right? So even though I'm not hunting elk and deer, that's still precluded. Does that make sense from?
No, you're still allowed to hunt birds. In fact, I've done it, and I've been yelled at by CWMU operator who had it posted, the little yellow signs, and we went hunting grouse because it was a really good grouse hunting spot. But he couldn't do anything about it because that regulation only covered those big game species.
Well, maybe that drives my point home, is that there's some clarification that needs to happen. I've read the signs, and maybe I've just never had the stones to venture across.
Well, Eric, you're a good guy. You wouldn't go stir the pot like Mike would. So,
and I'm not.
At the same time, but at the same time, I think as a show of they even allowed, some of these that have, Box Elder, let's just be blunt, Box Elder County is really where this comes to a head. And it's a legacy effect of the railroad and this checkerboarded mess that scatters throughout the county. It's not ideal for the landowners either, right? Because it creates a series of headaches. But at the same time, even I think there's a lot of creative ways to help create some good faith with the public in that, once those big game seasons are over, could they make some of that available for other, for small game hunting or other? Again, I'm not saying this needs to happen. I think we should be creative about the way we create that trade-off with the public. Because at the same time, I recognize a lot of CWMUs are involved in that. It helps offset the costs.
There's acres that is accessible.
Deer and elk in their alfalfa fields or whatever. So to me, we should be very creative about this approach, because, maybe just allowing access for, small rabbit hunting, in the later part of the season is a way to make that trade-off and still keep everybody happy. I just think there's a lot of ways to get out this. I'm a little leery of coming up with anything that's too prescriptive, because I'm afraid it will cause more headache than it's worth if we get really prescriptive in nature.
All right. Let me just take a second if I can. Number one, Mike, I think it'd be very helpful for the committee if you would tell us exactly where you were grouse hunting. Let's start there.
I expect
he's not even going to unmute. Come on.
Oh, I can tell you.
I do want to talk to you for a second, though, Mike, with your perspective, sitting on that Central Region rack and getting some perspective from these public hunters out there. You know, we've got 3 reasons that we put public lands into CWMUs. And, you know, my question is, what's your opinion? Are any of those reasons going to matter and hold weight with these folks that are so heated right now throughout the state? Or do they just want all the public lands out, period? That's my first question. Then I got a couple comments. Let me see what you have to say about that, Mike.
So I would say that the accessible public lands are the biggest firestorm with it. I think that people can understand, you know, if it's landlocked public lands, but accessible public lands where you're driving down a paved highway and you can't access a section of ground, that's unpalatable for many people. So.
Okay. And so my comment, thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. And that's kind of what I figured you'd probably say. And, you know, I've read several of these different CWMU boundaries and some of the responses that the operators had sent in, Chad. And, you know, so my background is I'm a professional land surveyor, and I deal a lot with property boundary disputes and things like that. And I noticed in several of them, there are places where potential or public lands have been included, and they've said that there's not access, but there's an argument, oh, well, there's this gap here that's 9 feet going to 0 feet, and therefore it is accessible. And to a land surveyor, that scares the crap out of me, because in the land surveying world, there aren't gaps. Okay, somebody owns that. We know that, and that's probably not a third person. It's one or the other of those individuals. And I certainly don't want to have public hunters out there untrained in that, making those decisions. And that certainly is an appropriate time for the Fish and Game to say, this is a place where we need an enforceable boundary. Otherwise, we're for sure going to have problems, and people are going to be bringing me in there to deal with the trespass dispute that will get out of hand. And then another thing is, you know, like for instance, I think Mike is generally right, and we need to be really careful about including these public lands. But there are other times when it doesn't make sense. For instance, the Johnson Mountain Ranch one, if you guys read that, where guys are shooting across I-70 to hit elk on a little piece of ground that's there cut off by I-70. If there's not a place for them to pull off and legally have access to that property, why doesn't that make sense to be included in the CWMU? So the Fish and Game can avoid having problems with people shooting from or across I-70. I just think that there are reasons where it does make good sense for us to do that. And I certainly am all on board with making a good, clear, and a relook at the CWMUs and make sure that there is a fair trade happening there. Because there are a lot of very good CWMUs with a lot of very good hunting. And when they do trade some permits, I think it is something that is helping out the public, and those that get an opportunity to hunt there, they get an opportunity to hunt the entire CWMU, not just that public land. So anyways, that's my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
It
Greg.
seems-
Anyone else? I'll go to Chris.
Oh, it seems like there'd be some good surveying business out of it. No, I think that there are certainly places where public land ought to be included. But I think, you know, like in the example of driving down the county road and land off to the right isn't accessible because, you know, for whatever reason, that one seems a little odd. A landlocked piece on one side of I-70 where it's a limited access highway, there's no access off the interstate right away. That's a different matter. I mean, so I think there's a lot of, the devil's in the details as always, but I do agree that we shouldn't just brush this under the carpet and say we talked about it tonight and let it go.
I've got to think we're going to have some rule modifications coming from this, because we certainly don't want to enrage the mobs by, you know, making a poor decision that takes advantage of public lands and the public hunter. Completely on board with everything you just said, Chris.
Can I kind of summarize just for my own benefit and for the divisions? Kind of what I've heard tonight is if there's accessible lands accessible public lands included in a CWMU, and they don't have to be, then the division should make, moving forward as CORs become available and CWMUs get renewed, we should make every effort to scrutinize the public lands that are available and make a judgment with that operator whether they're necessary to be included or not. And if they're not, then we need to clearly articulate to the public in our PowerPoint presentations and rack packets as to what the trade-offs are going to be that benefit the public, whether they're additional tags or trade lands that are easily accessible and understood. And if they have lands that don't need to be included in there, then we modify their boundary. We work with those operators to modify their boundaries to make sure that that accessible public land is not included in the future. Is that, I know that took longer than I wanted it to, but is that a pretty good summary of where we came tonight?
Let's add one thing that Mike said. Try to make it fair and equitable between the CWMUs, so there isn't such a disparity between them.
Great point.
Yeah, we've got there's a human element in it with the biologist, and every biologist can interpret things a little bit different. And, like I say, I think the Park Valley Hereford people are probably maybe giving up too much compared to everybody else. So.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going to make a joke about Herefords, but I won't.
So just.
I haven't heard.
Chris, don't hold back. This should be great. Go ahead.
Oh, I just was going to say that it's a little, but we are getting back to Herefords, but they've sort of been in the minority for a while lately. They make a good F1 cross, but I'm glad there's still some breeders out there.
So Justin, the only other nuance that I'd add that I think needs to be considered is the quality of the habitat, because not every acre is equitable, right? So there's some of these CWMUs that the private lands hold the crown jewel in terms of the habitat, right? Whether it's alfalfa fields, whether it's water. So again, I think that needs to be part of that conversation, is it because it's not a one-to-one trade on acreage necessarily, or the benefit to the public. So I just think that's my science background coming out in me, that not all acres are created equal, but I think that needs to be another important consideration. Because anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
It's a good point, Eric, and a good observation.
Does the division, it's a cooperative experience between the division and the public. Does the division bear any responsibility with informing that the CWMUs with public lands within their boundaries need to be licensed and insured? And the reason why I bring this up multiple times is I've been hearing it from the public lands reps on our Central Region RAC have really beat that drum.
I'll take that question as for me. Or Greg, do you want to answer it?
I'm not sure I want to answer it either, Chad, but I think I'd start off that we, of course, want to partner with our federal agencies and make sure that we are, in alignment and not getting our lines crossed with either BLM or Forest Service. So as far as whether we as an agency bear responsibility, I might push back on that a little bit and say that it might be the business entities that really bear the primary responsibility for complying with federal regs. But to the extent we can close the circle, I wouldn't have a concern with the agency filling that role.
I'll just add that we have operator trainings every year. That's something that I could add in there in an operator training, that if you're hunting on public land in your CWMU, you still need the proper licensing.
So can I ask just something that was brought up earlier about, so you have public land in your CWMU. In the grazing world, we would have a grazing permit, have legal authorization to be on the federal land, let's say. But did someone say that there would need to be a special license to operate on those included federal lands, and what would, special permission from the public land management agencies? What would that look like? And that's probably not happening at all.
Yeah, my understanding from our public lands reps is that they have to have a special use permit. To qualify for that special use permit, they have to be a licensed outfitter and a licensed guide through the state of Utah, because on public lands, outfitters and guides have to be licensed. I don't believe they have to be licensed on private lands.
So that's the only thing. They're fairly easy to get this special use permit on if you meet those qualifications. It's not a big deal.
So my understanding is that the triggering mechanism is operating a commercial business on federal property. It's not specific to hunting. It's not specific to whether it's a private voucher or a public permit. The state is the primary regulator of hunting activity, but it's the commercial aspect of this that has gotten people concerned.
So basically, it's no different than grazing. If you're involved in economic venture on public lands, there has to be a permit there. That's what it boils down to. That's the plain and simple language of it.
Well, grazing permits can be hard to come by if you don't already have one. I don't know whether if you're a licensed outfitter in the state of Utah and you have a business license to guide an outfit and have insurance or whatever, whether you can go into the Forest Service or BLM and get one. I don't know. That's the first I've even thought about it.
Well, Chris, even to the point, if you're filming hunting on public lands and making money off from that, you have to have a permit for that as well. So, because I know there's some folks been in trouble with that because they've filmed hunts, and as soon as you start making money, then that's where, as Greg mentioned, it triggers. So I don't think it's as restrictive as grazing permits, right? Because those are doled out on an acre basis, and you can really only issue grazing for so many acres. I think it's a little bit different, but I'm not sure beyond that.
So backing up just a little bit, if there's no more discussion on this, we did put this as an action item, and so it probably warrants a motion of some type. And I think we've had. I mean, I've got a notepad here full of pretty good gems that, as an agency, I think we need to be looking at. Would anybody like to formalize some of this stuff into a motion, or would we prefer to have more discussion on this?
So just a point of clarification from you, Justin, like what kind of direction are you looking for? Like, I don't know that there's the avenue of, saying, let's strike this verbiage from the rule tonight, but how would we proceed? So maybe we meet in a different meeting and actually discuss those topics with the division and other parties.
The thing I thought of is, and Greg can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's two, according to the charter, this is an advisory council to two groups. One is to the Wildlife Board, and the other is to our director. And Greg, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought part of this was advisory to us as an agency. And so, okay.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, and so there's two ways we can go about it. And I heard some great things. I think Eric said, let's not get too prescriptive so we don't have unintended consequences that weren't thought out. And so if you want to make a motion to our director to have us as his staff in the wildlife section look at some of these things, and we can bullet point and highlight some of the ones that were captured, or to the Wildlife Board, I think either of those would be appropriate. And then we can circle back with this group and report similar to what we're going to do on the next agenda item.
So move to the.
Okay. So with
do you want someone to try to articulate a motion, or did you? I thought your summary, Justin, was good, and that the basic tenor that I'm thinking is that we're recommending that the director and that the wildlife section review the rules for including public land in CWMUs with an eye toward making them more uniform, making sure that they're more transparent, making sure that there is, reviewing the situations where the public lands are otherwise accessible, and making sure that there is ample public benefit in exchange. And so we're basically asking you to just look under the hood and try to figure it out with that kind of guidance.
I second that.
I don't know if I mean, I couldn't repeat it back to you. I hope somebody got it, but that's basically what I think we're trying to do. We're recommending that the director and the wildlife section go do that. And
So the only thing I would add is I think the spreadsheet that Chad's already started working on, that I don't remember if it was Mike or Chris or Greg, I think that'd be an important piece of this, even to make it available to us in the future, to really understand where these things, exactly what that trade is looking like, or to better adequately describe, maybe that's the way to articulate it, to adequately describe the public benefit of each of those CWMUs that are including public land. Because I think that has to be something that comes out of this as a better quantification of that benefit.
The phrase I would use is that recommended the director and the wildlife section, they inventory the current CWMUs that have public lands and identify all those components that we mentioned earlier as to, the various facets of those. How many acres, public, private, are they accessible? What's the additional public benefit in tags? Is there an exchange? Are they level 2 or 3? That kind of, first we need to see where we are. So it's like a situation report, status quo inventory. And
yeah, I think I've captured the spirit. I think we all know the spirit of what this committee would like our agency to do. I think capturing it in a motion is kind of what we're struggling with. Kristen, what have you jotted down?
I think she's been hog tying some kind of an animal. The last I saw a picture there.
Yeah. I bet she said a swear word or two. Like, what?
I don't know what that is. It looks like a bear.
Yeah.
It is. It's a bear cub. Let's see. I did take some notes, but I think you do need to actually say that you're making the motion. But to recommend the director review the rules, including all public land, to make them more uniform, transparent, review the current public land and whether it's accessible, and what the public benefit will be.
So moved.
And then I would just add into inventory, to complete an inventory of the existing.
I think you could. Oh, sorry, Chris.
That's basically it. Complete that spreadsheet inventory.
So I think you could capture it by saying the motion would be to complete an inventory of CWMUs that are including public lands, and review those CWMUs that are including public lands to make sure that the compensation to the public is equitable between CWMUs and equitable to the public. Does that capture it?
I think
No, go ahead, Michael.
I was just gonna say, I like what Chris talked about before in his when he was talking about the accessible public lands being a focal point to that.
I think that Kristen had it pretty well if she would have just added reference to the inventory.
Yeah.
Then I'd second Mike's motion.
Let's try this one more time just to make sure. Kristen, can you take one more stab at this, and then we'll let Mike make the motion.
Sure. Director review the rules, including public land, to make them more uniform, transparent, review current public land and whether it's accessible, and what the public benefit is, and complete an inventory of CWMUs that contain public lands. And that is all I have.
I mean,
capture it?
I think that captures the spirit of what we're looking for. Do you feel comfortable with that verbiage, Justin, to direct you?
I do. I mean, I think if I were to give this to Director Reynolds and say this is what the CWMU Advisory Committee came up with, I think we'd have a very clear picture of what we need to do. Chad, I guess you'd be the one working on it. You comfortable with that motion?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. All right.
And
so we have a motion by Mike Christensen. Oh, sorry, I cut you off, Mike. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna make sure that's to the director, not to the wildlife board.
Correct. Yep. Okay, so we have that motion by Mike Christensen. Do we have a second? Was that you, Chris?
Yes, I'll second it.
Okay. I think we've had ample time for discussion, but if anyone wants more, now's your chance. If not, let's take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, that passes unanimously 8-1.
And Justin, is it appropriate to give some kind of report back to the wildlife board since they asked us to look at this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a part of it. You know, as we work through this, any change we make in rule or in practice would certainly go before the wildlife board. And then I think there's value in circling back to this group next year or whenever we have our next meeting and giving a report if progress has been made at that point. So.
In the past on rule changes and things like that, the divisions involved the committee to take part in that. Do you want the committee to take part in that, or do you want to do that internally?
You know, I'm not opposed to opening it up. I actually think it's a good sounding board for us. And I think we got out of practice. Nowhere in the rule does it say that rule changes need to be ran through the CWMU Advisory Committee or the CWMU Association. But I do think it's a good practice because I think members, this is an eclectic group. You have different experiences by design. That's why we pulled everyone together. And so if you have, you might be able to see blind spots that we don't. And so in practice, yes, I would support bringing rule changes through and just saying this is what we're thinking about doing. The one thing that I would say that is difficult or more challenging now is these are open and public meetings. And so, to brainstorm and do some of that gets a little bit more difficult, but I would not be opposed to having some type of work session.
I'm in favor of that, but I have to give this admonition. A camel is a horse drafted by committee, wound up with a few extra lumps and things. So although it has great utility in certain environments.
That's a fair point. I think what we would do is probably come with a straw dog. We've got some good staff that work on these issues and they communicate with the public hunters. They communicate with CWMU operators. Our managers are incredibly intelligent, and I'm really impressed with our wildlife staff as a whole. I think we've got a good section and a lot of momentum. And so if we took a stab at it and then brought it back to a committee like this, even if it were a much shorter meeting and it was the only agenda item, I wouldn't have any qualms doing that. So.
I do think too, Justin, that the CWMU Association would like some say. I think it'd be nice to have a working group where we were there, members of the association and other interested parties.
So, and I was thinking the exact same thing. Specifically, it would be good to have some representation from the CWMUs that have public lands included, right? So that they don't feel like they've just been left out in the cold on the process here. I think that creates a little more transparency and a little more buy-in.
I would agree, Eric, and that's one reason we didn't go through CWMUs tonight, because they're not here. There's no due process. There's, I'm really glad we stayed at the higher level that we did. And Chad, I'm really glad that you reached out to him so we could get some content and understanding, because I think at face value, it's like, why would you ever include accessible public land into a CWMU? And then you read those reports, you read some of the reports from our internal staff in the wildlife section with challenges we've had with enforceable boundaries. And in some cases, we've asked CWMUs to include public land to avoid some of these conflicts that have been going on. And so I'm really appreciative of that content. And that's a great thought, Eric. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the last one, or second to last one we have is open forum. And Chad, we might have covered some of this already, but do you want to talk about some of the other business that we had from last year?
Yeah, most of what I wanted to talk about here was the federal lands and CWMUs and the permits. That was follow up from last year. I feel like we covered that adequately in the last discussion. But a lot of this is a request just and an opportunity for anybody that's on this advisory committee to bring up things that we may need to look at in the future, or things that you'd like to discuss potentially at a later time, things to put on our radar, I guess. So I think mostly we just want to open this up to the committee members, and if there's items you want to discuss, let's hash them out. We put it as the
Chad, actually,
we really weren't sure if there was going to be an action or not. So in case that there is an action that you want to have us do, that we made it an action item. So with that, I'll just open it up to the committee and see if you have anything that you want to bring forth.
Well, I kind of feel like I've talked too much tonight, but I hear from a lot of people, and this is the only forum that I have to express that and what I hear. Some of the big issues I'm hearing from hunters are the accessibility to the CWMU, such as the ATVs. And I'm not picking on any particular CWMU at all, but there's so many. If you look through the hunt planner and they say no ATVs, no ATVs, no ATVs, no horses, but those very same CWMUs are using ATVs and horses. And that's how most people are getting around the mountains, by using some kind of non-car, non-truck, whether it be a motorcycle, an ATV, a UTV. So it just feels like the public doesn't have the same kind of an access. Along the lines of access, it's been talked about before, but I've heard from a couple people this year that they were really frustrated that the first day that they were allowed on the CWMU was the morning of their hunt. There was no prior, explanation of how the roads laid out or anything with the CWMU. So there should be some kind of a better, a better system of information, even like a summer day where, a CWMU is required one day during the summer to have an open day where people can come and feel for it. So they're not just showing up on that first day. The November hunt thing still is bothersome, as we heard tonight. Like, there's a lot of CWMUs that are just given like that one day for a November buck hunt, or they're giving no days for a September elk rut hunt. And those, is that a fair and equitable experience for them? And then guests, I hear a lot about guests still. Like you can take one person or you can take no guest. I don't know how to deal with all those, but it almost feels like that, if you're going to go to Disneyland and you can take one guest, it just, you have to leave the rest of your family home, but you can take one. Now, I'm not saying that the CWMU should be opened up to, to everybody in the person's group, but there's got to be some kind of leeway there.
I'll be the one to volunteer to stay home on the Disneyland trip.
I'll fight you for it, Chris. So, Mike, on the numbers of people attending, I think that's a really sticky point. Because if I show up with all 5 of my brothers and they each bring 2 kids, and I'm being a little bit excessive, right? But it's going to cut into your hunt quality to have 4 trucks running around doing my scouting for me while I sit at camp, waiting for the phone call to tell me when they found my buck. So I think that's a slippery slope to some degree. But at the same time, I drew a CWMU tag and my dad stayed home and just my brother went, right? So I can see both sides of that. It seems like last time we met, this came up, and most of them said they tried to accommodate that if they could. And I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of agree. My daughter, she drew a CW tag a few years ago, and same thing. They have their rules, and I just asked. I said, would it be okay, if my dad came along and my son? He's like, yeah, that's fine. I think in my experience in talking just to some other CWMU owners is, they don't want 4 different trucks driving around all over the land. Now, that being said, having, everybody sticking together in a group so they can be there to experience. At the same time, I don't think you need to have everybody scattered all over to scout either. I mean, that's if that's their I think they do have they have a right to be able to kind of regulate that. Now, people being in the same group, standing there together, if you want to take your noisy kids along, maybe that should be okay. But how do you regulate that up on the mountain? I mean, there could still be some give and take. I mean, I think it'd be great to have more people in there. But yeah, when they say it's only one person, I think that stinks too, because when you shoot something, that's a job. But
yeah, I agree with both of you guys that that it shouldn't just be a free for all. But I think that like one vehicle, I mean, there could be different verbiage used to force the hands of the CWMUs that don't allow it, because there are a lot of good CWMUs. I think if I showed up with at Tim's place, he'd probably let me bring my wife and a couple kids in the pickup truck with me. But there's so many that they don't.
Hey, I agree with most of the things you're saying, Mike. I agree. I think we should allow people to bring guests. I don't know if you limit that to a vehicle or what, but I think the more the merrier, if that's what people want. The part about accessibility, I think where it gets tricky for most ranchers is you can just take those vehicles off the road. And that's kind of our thing on our ranch, right? We try the best we can. And we don't use them a lot, but if you do need one, it's to go retrieve something that's dead, right? Well, we've had family members who, okay, take your 4-wheeler, and they drive down every ridge with their 4-wheeler and ruin it for everyone else. So I think that's part of the concern with accessibility. I get your point that, hey, if they're doing it, why can't we? But in the same, I think the rancher has more to lose, right? If he's running down every ridge on his buggy, he has more to lose by kicking game off or whatever than a public hunter who, hey, I'm here for 5 days. I'm going to make the best of it and go to every corner of the ranch on my 4-wheeler. I think that's where you get into some sticky points on the accessibility.
Well, and not only that, I mean, when it comes to people running around, I mean, I know a lot of people that own private land, and one of the biggest reasons they shut things down is because people just beat the crap out of it. You know, nobody respects it. If you don't own it, you don't respect it, and it's incredible. We run into that on our own, you know, state and federal lands. People don't, you know, they don't stick to the signs, and there's reasons they're there, so you're not beating the crap out of a road and making it so that the whole mountainside falls apart. And so, yeah, I agree that it needs to be equal, but again, that's kind of a hard one to regulate. If people start, you know, taking off because I don't want to carry an elk quarter, 3/4 of a mile, and I can cut off, you know, a half a mile by busting down through the brush, that doesn't make it okay to go and do that. But, you know, am I going to do it? Some people are. They're going to just say, well, nobody's watching, I can take off and do this. When that kind of screws it up for everybody else.
With both of those sentiments, I do find it's hard though when we always like. It's really hard to watch like we just heard on Pisgah. You know, that guy's hiking in, and here comes the landowner. He's driving up on his UTV, and it happens a lot more. I would say that happens way more than, you know, the guy that goes off road and he under the CWMU rules. Because they're given rules, you know, hey, you can drive on this road, you can drive on a road, you can't drive off road. I think I just feel like there should be a little bit of openness there. And just like no horses, you know, there's CWMUs that use horses, but a guy can't show up and go ride his horse and go hunt. I mean, it's tough because it's 5,000 acres. It's a large piece, but at the same time, that can be made really small, as Tim said, if you're driving around and going down, you know, everything. So.
Well, and isn't the state hunter supposed to have the same access as the other? So, I mean, I guess, you know, if you like to your point on Pisgah, and as we talked to Mike about that earlier, yeah, you know, if you're going to be driving around up there, then, you know, the other guy should have access too. And thing that sucks is the other guy saw it. And he's going to be like, well, this is kind of crap. You know, why don't I get to do these same things? Why don't I have that same access? Yeah, go ahead.
To Clint and Mike's point, to me, it seems like this is something that maybe Chad can clarify in some training next year, that access means, right? So not just, hey, you've got the whole ranch. In the meantime, I'm going to run over there on my side by side with my paying client while you have to hike, you know, 3 miles to get to that same ridge. Just make sure that they're clear that meaning equal access means both means and, you know, just access to the land as a whole. I don't know, maybe I'm being too simplistic, but it seems like that's the place to start and remind them that that's part of the agreement, right? So they could be called into the board for the same reason, you know, not allowing the similar means of access as they could for not allowing total access.
Eric, your thoughts, your mind's going the same direction that mine is. So Mike has brought up 4 things here. You know, hunt dates, September elk, November deer, scouting, not having to show up that first morning of the hunt with no map, no idea where you're going or what you're doing. Only bringing one guest, huge problem if you're moose or elk hunting. And then, you know, not being able to take an ATV or one single vehicle, something like that. I would sure like in our trainings this next year, Chad, for the operator trainings. So these are all gray areas. All of them are kind of talked about. You know, if you're the poor guy that happens to have all of these problems hit you, which you could be that guy, you could be, yeah, great, you're going to hunt elk the very last 5 days of October. I'm not going to let you scout. You're bringing one guest and you're parking your truck at the gate. You could be that guy. We've had that complaint come to us before. It would sure be nice in our trainings just to talk to them about, hey, let's talk about the gray areas, guys, and make sure you understand we're trying to have a fair and equitable hunt with all these guys with reasonable access, with a good experience, a positive experience. Here are some things that we hear about. Can we try to fix some of these things without having to put it in rule for you guys? We've left it open so that maybe you guys could help try to take care of these public hunters, but also give you the flexibility to work around your schedules and your system. And then talk about the 4 specific things, Chad, and give them some ideas of here's what we're seeing, here's what would be nice, you know? What do you think?
That's as you guys were talking, that's what I was thinking, is like, man, you guys are just giving me ammo for my next operator training meeting. So I think that's a great idea, a great place. Even, you know, we're probably going to do it online again this year just with COVID. And I got a lot of feedback from the ones that watched my online presentation, and even some, you know, saying that it opened their eyes to some things. So I think it is an effective manner. One of the positives with this online training is it can be a lot shorter. They don't have to travel. It's a lot easier for them to do it, and there's a higher confidence that that'll be completed and that they'll watch it. So I think it's an opportunity that we could really reach a lot of people. And like you said, without trying to fix something another way, maybe see if it can be fixed through operator training first. Yeah, I like that idea.
Well, Chad, I think you're even that blunt with it. Just flat say, look, you know, whether you have Mike come from the board and say, here's something the board's discussed and heard about, or whether you do it, but then just tell them, if this is something that we can fix, that you guys can fix, then fine. But if you don't, then it may require some rule changes, and nobody wants to see more additional rules. So I think you put it to them just that bluntly, that this is something you guys can take care of on your own, or at some point we may have to address it with a rule change.
Could I ask just clarification that, you know, the trophy hunts, the bucks and bulls, let's say, and then they're the antlerless hunts. And when you talk about, is most of this about equal access on the trophy hunts? In other words, or is it, you know, like on our ranch, on our CWMU and Ensign ranches, we might have 40 or 50 antlerless elk hunters. I don't know how many, but a fairly big number. And so now you double or triple that with 3 guests, and they each have 3 ATVs, and you're trying to, and it's a late season to begin with. I'm just wondering if most of these comments are related more to the paying hunters, that, you know, the trophy hunters that pay, and then the state hunters, the public hunters, should have the exact same thing, or whether it extends to all the antlerless.
Really quick, Chris. So I had 2 antlerless elk hunters that hunted different CWMUs that were really frustrated that they had to walk in with 1 guest.
Yeah, I would.
And had to cover all that country looking for 1 herd of elk, you know, that was on the ranch. It was pretty cumbersome for those people.
No, I don't. You know, we allow vehicles to come in, not ATVs, but it's still big country, you know. But on the antlered hunts, you know, we guide the public hunters, and they do use ATVs for both the private ones that are paying customers and the public. But on the antlerless side, it's a different. I haven't really thought about it until now, but all of these things are important in maintaining good public relations. And the thought I was coming to me, I don't know if you guys have experienced it, and I don't know that it's just a COVID phenomenon, but that outdoor recreation is growing exponentially. It may not be in our industry here of big game hunting, you know, I think it is, but, you know, for a long time, we had to have programs to entice the rising generation to get a tag, to go through hunter safety. But public lands and all lands, I mean, our trails here, and I'm on a county council here in Summit County, our trailheads are just overwhelmed. And it's the same with the national parks. It's the same with, you know, the forests up in the North Slope, wherever you go. And so there's going to be more and more conflicts, more and more utilization. So we've got to be at the top of our game, I think, to maintain good relations and to do it well.
There's no doubt about that, Chris. Hey, Mike, your last comment that you made, what I like about that is we're not talking about a gray area, in my opinion, anymore there. that is a rule violation, because I promise, I just cannot imagine a scenario where the outfitter is not using trucks or ATVs or machines to go on their property and hunt with paid hunters. There's no way they're walking all their paid hunters in there. And if they are not, it is a rule violation, period. That's where we've stepped over the gray line, the gray area, and we need to make sure that gets reined in. That's not really my opinion. That's the rule. It's not a similar hunt for them. You know, I totally understand restricting ATVs, because I've seen people do it all over public land, drive off road and go crazy. But still, I sure love it when they say, hey, we pack as many people as you can in a truck and go get after it. Then you can get that moose and you can get that elk out, and you're not going to kill yourself. But one person, one guest, and on foot, and nobody else, none of the paid hunters are doing that. That's a rule violation, and I can't wait to have those guys sit before me.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Is Greg Hansen still on, Greg? Are you available?
Yep, I'm here.
Just a quick question with the rule. When it talks about accessibility, is our definition clear enough? Because I know we've always viewed that as you can hunt any place on the ranch that you want. You can't have certain areas that are sectioned off for paid hunters versus non-paid hunters. But then on accessibility, is it clear enough for us that if paid hunters can use ATVs, then public hunters can use ATVs as well?
So the phrase in the statute and the rule is a comparable hunting opportunity between the private and the public hunter. I could scan the rule real quick and see if we have a specific definition. I don't believe we do. And I'm also a little hesitant to kind of speculate without having a specific case before us. You know, I think each situation is going to be a little bit different. But two thoughts kind of came to mind. I mean, one is Chad's operator training. I think that's a great idea. I fully support that. I think the other is lining things out more specifically in our management plans about what is allowable and what's not, so that the division and the operators are on the same page at the time of the COR renewal. And then we can put that stuff in the hunt planner. You know, a lot of it's communication, but if one of the things that comes out of this is we need to be a little bit more specific in our rule, it's probably something that us and this group here can brainstorm and work through. But as of now, from what I'm recalling from the rule and the statute, it's just a vague term of comparable hunting opportunity.
Yeah, and really, Greg, what I'm getting with that is, you take the situation that Mike Christensen was talking about earlier, where cow hunters have to walk in because they're public hunters. But if, hypothetically, the paid hunters are driving in, similar to what Greg Wilding was getting at, and that's not a comparable one. Is that something then that you would view as a violation and should be coming before this body?
I think every situation is a little bit different, because, for example, the issue of the CWMU that we ran through today with the operator that was on the telephone explaining about how he was looking for an injured elk. That was an access issue from the very beginning, yet the hunter came back with a pretty high satisfaction rating, and I'm not sure we really landed in the area where it would be a continued, the group was stating that it would be a continued violation. So I'm pretty hesitant to speculate, but I do think access issues, motorized versus non-motorized, is definitely something that could be a violation of that comparable hunting opportunity requirement.
Well, thanks, Greg. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot by any means. I'm just looking for clarity, and I would echo the comments that have been stated earlier as the chair, that if we can swing the pendulum from training and education before we go full-blown regulation, that's my preference. I'm not a big regulation person unless we have to to go that route. And so I think these are great things. And Chad, if you'd be willing to take these to the CWMU trainings, I could see a lot of value there.
The last thing I wanted to talk about, because I'm talking a lot tonight, is in the hunt planner, there's a lot of CWMUs that say that the hunter cannot continue hunting if he wounds an animal. Now, I can understand hit one and you're done. I tried to get the mule deer committee to put that, recommend that, every time I've been on there. But so I understand that, but I don't understand if the biologist allows that not to continue hunting phrase to be put in that rule of the CWMU. I feel like that's way over the top, because if somebody hits a deer on the first day, they should have 4 more days to look for that deer. They shouldn't have to stop hunting.
My first thought is, to me, it would depend a lot on how they treat their paid hunters. Meaning, if the guy that paid you $8,000 for a tag and he wounds a deer on day 1 and you tell him, thanks, not your tag, you're done. Do you see what I'm saying? To me, it still comes, some of that comes back to, the equitable opportunities there. I think you've made a valid point about looking for that animal. It seems unreasonable to just tell them they're done and send them home.
I know just, certain people that I know that run little outfits and stuff, and yeah, they'll do that. You hit an animal, that's your animal, but I've never heard them say, go home. Typically it's, let's keep looking for the dang thing. I would hope that as a state hunter, that if I was on a CWMU, that if I hit something, I could keep, looking for it. Heck, even if it's hot, looking for smelling for it the next day or 2 days later, just hoping that I could find it. Yeah, I don't know if I think it would be wrong if it was, see you later, you don't get to come back on the property. I would think you'd still have 5 days, but that hunter should understand, you see another trophy walking around after you put a bullet in one. I don't think they should be taking that one myself, but.
Yeah, that's like I say, I'm fine. Most CWMUs have that, you hit one, that's your animal rule, but I just noticed that there was a handful that said you couldn't continue hunting, and just didn't know if that's needs to be clarified on the division's end, because I think that's where the biologist bears some responsibility to weed out those rules that aren't comparable or are not comparable, just don't make any sense, I guess.
I think on that I think the biologists are probably assuming that the scenario, you're not hunting anymore, meaning you're not shooting another animal. But with that being said, and maybe Greg can pipe in here, but I'm actually not even 100% convinced that if that public hunter says, I want to keep hunting after wounding one, that they wouldn't be able to. I don't, what do you think on that, Greg? Because that's an ethical thing that I think a lot of people feel that way, but I don't know. Greg, what do you think?
That's a tough one too. I think I'd agree with Mr. Thacker's idea that it has a lot to do with how they treat their private folks. First off, second, my understanding is that those rules are in the management plan that we review as part of their COR application. And so that's an agreement that the division's made with the operator. And I mean, in a way, the agency is indicating they're comfortable with that approach. So it might be something worth reviewing. And maybe we've talked a lot about training our operators. Maybe that's something we need to train our staff on a little bit as well.
Chad, maybe you should stop asking Greg all the hard questions. So I'll make you a deal. I'll stop asking Greg hard questions if you do as well. So.
This is Mike Shug from Pisgah. Can I ask a question?
Mike, this is for board discussion. So.
Oh, I thought it was an open forum. Excuse me.
Oh, sorry. It's open forum for the committee. So. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't understand that. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Any other topics we need to cover here for open forum? Okay, I think we had this as an action item, and so I don't know if we need to take action though per se, really, unless we want to talk about making sure we included some of this discussion in the training. So that's really the only avenue I could see.
Well, I don't know how to make a motion on that, but just to direct the division to continue educating the CWMU members and the division internally on something like that. I mean, that's not a motion. Is that what you're looking for, or you're saying you don't need a motion?
There were the 4 things, though. I think there was 4 specific things that we wanted Chad to cover in his training, which I think what Justin's suggesting would need to be in the form of a motion to make it formal. Is that correct in that, Justin?
Yeah, and it's just because we have it as an action item on here. I think we would do it either way, but if we want to make a motion and record it, we're happy to do it. So.
Let's go ahead and make a motion and get this done, shall we?
Greg, you had the 4 things already written or something, didn't you?
I'm ready.
Hit us.
I'd like to make a motion that headed up by, or that the division in their operator trainings specifically talk to the CWMU operators about flexibility on hunt dates, specifically, hunting elk at appropriate times and deer at appropriate times, looking at those November and September hunts. Putting some consideration to either some early scouting or map preparation and providing it to the hunters so that they can be prepared when their first day of hunting starts. To consider allowing them enough guests appropriate for the hunt to make it a reasonably fun and enjoyable hunt. And then to make consideration to utilizing appropriate vehicles to hunt and to retrieve game, and to make sure they put in rules to accommodate taking care of their ranch. However, having their rules be reasonably the same for the public hunter and the private hunter. I miss anything, Mike? You're muted, buddy.
Oops. I'd probably also add into the not continue hunting. I don't know, maybe not to that would be more of a division thing. So no, I think you've covered it.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion by Greg. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes 8-0. It's unanimous. So, okay, the last thing we have on our agenda is other business, but before we do, I'd like to go a little bit off script, and I cut off the gentleman earlier from the public that wanted to state something, but I did not want it to get in the way of the the motions that we were about to make. So, the representative from Mount Pisgah, if you're still on, did you have something you wanted to add now?
Yes, I would. First of all, Mount Pisgah, we do not sell tags. It's all mostly donated for youth and people that have kids and stuff that want to hunt. We do not sell tags. I think we all have the same objectives, is to make a good hunt for the state hunters. And we have to put up with a lot because every one of them are different and they all have different expectations. we're trying to manage our ranch to give them a good hunt. So one guy wants to bring 4 people with him to hunt. Well, that's really screwing it up for the next hunt because they're going to push a bunch of those deer out. So where's the happy medium for us to make a decision? Because one guy goes, well, where's the bucks? Well, the last guy pushed them all around. You got to go find them. It makes it very difficult. And we have a lot of perimeter roads that they can drive on to do their scouting. But when you're going to let a lot of people on your ranch, that's really screwing up. There's 2 different things I think they're trying to accomplish. One guy wants a big buck. One guy is serious about hunting. Another one wants to make it a family event. So it makes it tough on us. Which one do you schedule where? And they're all complaining at you. We all have the same goal, I feel, to make a good hunt for these state hunters and for our private hunters or the people that we're helping out with kids or whatever that's there. But I think it's difficult to try to cover all of it and make everybody happy. I think you draw the line and say, these are the correct things we need to do. We do our best. And suggestions are always helpful in trying to make that medium line so that you're covering everybody's needs. And with that, that's thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Oh,
Justin,
Tim,
can
go
I
ahead.
just respond to that real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Mike, what I would tell you honestly is, and we've had great success in doing this and we haven't always done it, but I would guide your public hunters and treat them like it was, your son with the tag. And I think you'll have a lot better success with the public if you just take a little extra time. And it's, probably extra money, but I think it's worth it in the long run. They are the most important hunter on our ranch every year. Without them, we don't have a CWMU program.
Amen.
Well, what we got to do is, we are going to guide them this next year, putting our ranch hand with them. He knows the ranch very well. I don't want a bunch of people driving ATVs all over my ranch, tearing it up. They don't know what they're doing. It's a liability for them and for us. There's outside perimeter roads to work on. That works very well for us. But when that guy goes in and wants to hunt, if he goes in alone and goes where areas we see bucks are, they all kill. But when they come in with and I don't want to say this in a wrong way, but this is an example, brings in a 12 and an 8-year-old that knows nothing about hunting, and they're out chasing butterflies or over here, over there, guys, the bucks are gone. You know that. Those nice 4x4 bucks, they're gone. They're in the next ranch. Well, then, where's all the deer? So I had that incident this year with one state hunter. He brought his kids, first day, was having a good time, but not seeing deer. So I said to him, I said, you want to shoot a nice buck? He goes, yeah. I says, come alone in the morning, go over this canyon, and when you shoot, I'll bring your family in on the 4-wheeler and retrieve it for you, and you can have a great experience. And when they do that, it's awesome. But you're trying to please all these people and different ideas, and it's tough for us. It's tough for everybody here.
And
we all.
It is difficult, Mike. I totally agree. But I'm just telling you, when you let give the public hunter what they want, you're not going to have any more problems. I can promise you that.
Let's wrap up this part of the discussion. I really I appreciate those comments. Thank you, and I'm really glad that we included this into the training, because I think these are the types of discussions that we should have in trainings with operators. And there's lots of different perspectives, and so as Eric mentioned earlier, we don't want to be over regulatory because there's challenges with that as well. So let's move on to the last thing that we have, which is other business. Is there anything else that we wanted to cover as a body?
I do have one quick question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Mentor can tags on CWMUs without the CWMU's prior permission.
Mike, you froze up. I couldn't hear the question.
Oh, sorry, Ken. The question was about mentors, and I just wondering if the permit holder can mentor without prior permission from the CWMU.
Well, since Chad and I promised not to ask Greg any more hard questions.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah, there you go.
Why don't you let me look up some of those specific regs? I don't know off the top of my head, but we can sure figure that out and get it back out to this group quickly.
I feel the other way, Mike. I feel like we need a mentee permit program because my kids always draw and I don't. And anyways, there just might be value there. I'm just kidding. So
I second that motion.
Me too. I was gonna say, I say it's done. 8-0. There we go.
Cool. I love my
Kids, get on
job.
the tags.
It was great working with you guys. So that was awesome. So no, you know, Mike, is that one that we can get back to you in offline as a division? Okay. Greg Hansen and I can look at that tomorrow or later tonight. If we get something, we'll reach back out to you. So good question.
For sure. Thanks.
Okay. Is there anything else? Any other business we need to cover? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Unanimous. So, all righty. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate everybody's attention tonight and appreciate your involvement. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to be with you.
Thanks.
Yeah, you guys have a good night.
Good night. Be safe.